What would you do if one day you were kicked out of a restaurant simply because of a hat? But not just any hat, it was a political symbol. A flag representing supporters of the former president. And you. The son of a man with significant influence in American politics. Would you accept this situation or do something that the world would never forget? This is the story of Barron Trump. The son of Donald Trump. A young man but full of resilience. Who faced this exact situation at an upscale restaurant in Los Angeles. But instead of reacting the way many would expect, Barron turned what seemed like a mundane event into a strategy to change the way society views unity and understanding. Let's explore this story, a story not just about a hat, but about patience, calmness, and the lesson on how to handle disagreement in society. Can Barron turn this event into an opportunity for change? Stay tuned to find out. On a beautiful afternoon in Los Angeles, as the sunlight faded into pale golden rays, Barron Trump, the son of former President Donald Trump, decided to do something very ordinary. Very everyday, he wanted to enjoy a quiet meal at a famous restaurant in the Beverly Hills area. LA Terrace. Where expensive dishes are meticulously prepared and famous diners frequently visit. Despite being an influential figure in politics, Barron had no intention of using his fame to disturb others. He simply wanted to have a calm, relaxing lunch. As Barron walked through the restaurant's main door, the fresh outdoor air immediately turned into an atmosphere of luxury, filled with the enticing aromas of dishes being served. But it was also in this space that the red MAGA hat Barron wore on his head immediately drew attention. The MAGA hat, Make America Great Again, was a powerful political symbol of his father's. One of the prominent emblems of the previous presidential campaign. He didn't realize that this hat held more power than he had imagined. At first, Barron thought of himself as just another young man, wanting to have lunch at a restaurant like anyone else. However, as soon as he entered, the atmosphere around him became somewhat heavy. Eyes began to stop. Some people whispered to each other, and others stared directly at Barron. He sat at the table, leaned back in his chair, but still felt that something was different, like people weren't staring at him because he was Barron Trump, but because of the hat. The uncomfortable feeling was similar to walking through a crowd and hearing whispers. The scrutinizing glances making it impossible not to notice. Less than a few minutes later, a man approached Barron's table. It was the restaurant manager. He was a middle-aged man, dressed neatly, with a broad but somewhat awkward smile. "Hello, sir," the manager greeted. "We're happy to have you here. But I must ask you to remove that hat. It's our restaurant's policy." Barron looked up at the manager, slightly surprised. "I don't really understand. Why should I take off my hat?" Barron responded, his voice calm. The manager pursed his lips, clearly uncomfortable. "You can understand that this hat might make some other guests feel uneasy," he explained, as if trying to avoid conflict. "We want everyone to feel comfortable here." Barron looked into the manager's eyes and realized that this wasn't a misunderstanding. He was really being asked to remove the hat. At that moment, Barron just smiled and replied, "I'm just here to eat. Not to cause any trouble. But I don't think I should have to take off my hat. I can eat here without disturbing anyone." The other diners had started to observe. And it felt like every eye in the restaurant was focused on Barron's table. The manager remained firm. "We have our policy. And I can't ignore it. If you don't take off your hat, we'll have to ask you to leave." At this point, Barron began to feel uneasy. But he remained calm. He stood up, adjusted his hat, and responded in a gentle but firm tone, "If my hat is causing a problem, Then I'll leave. But I won't take it off. It all happened in just a few seconds. But for Barron, it was an important moment. He didn't want to make a scene. Nor did he want to be the center of attention. But he couldn't let his principles be violated. The other diners began to whisper and talk amongst themselves. A middle-aged man nearby spoke up. "I don't understand why the restaurant won't just leave him alone. He's just here for lunch." A woman sitting at a table opposite nodded in agreement. But there were also others who appeared upset. As if the presence of the MAGA hat made them uncomfortable. Barron quietly stood up from the table and walked toward the door. In that moment, he felt like he was the only one being criticized in the restaurant. But he didn't care. Just as he was about to step out the door, the manager called after him, "It's a shame we couldn't resolve this." Barron didn't turn back. He just gave a small wave and stepped outside. The sudden feeling of rejection made him feel a bit lost. But he didn't stop. As soon as he stepped out the door, he noticed the air outside felt somehow lighter. No one outside seemed to care about the hat on his head. And Barron felt relieved. As though freed from the scrutinizing gazes inside the restaurant. He walked to a nearby park and sat down on a bench. The feeling was hard to describe. A mix of anger and disappointment. He wondered if he had made a mistake by not taking off the hat or if the manager had simply wanted to avoid an unnecessary argument. Either way, Barron couldn't understand why something as trivial as a hat could make everything so tense. He picked up his phone and started sending a few messages to family and friends. "Just got kicked out of a restaurant because of my hat. This is so strange." The message was quickly followed by responses. A friend replied immediately, "What? Really? Did they give a reason?" Barron shrugged and texted back, "I guess they didn't like the symbol on the hat. But I don't understand why a hat is such a big deal." Soon after, his family began to reach out. "What happened? Don't let it get to you. They don't understand. And they never will," his mother wrote in a long message. Barron sighed. Then decided to take a walk to clear his mind. He felt he needed more time to think about this. Perhaps he needed to find a better way to deal with situations like this. Knowing that life would never be short of challenges like this one. After all, this was just the beginning. Surely, similar situations would continue to happen. But whether Barron could find a way to handle them more gracefully, that only time would tell. As Barron stepped out of LA Terrace, he felt as though he had been thrown into a completely different world. It wasn't because he wasn't used to being in the spotlight. The Trump name was always associated with fame and sometimes controversy, but because this was the first time in his life he had truly felt treated unfairly. Simply because of a small symbol on his hat. The feeling of being unjustly rejected lingered in his mind. Stepping outside, Barron stood for a moment. Took a deep breath. And let the cool Los Angeles air ease some of his discomfort. He could hear the distant hum of traffic and saw pedestrians pass by. Oblivious to what had just happened. But for Barron, everything felt heavy. He never imagined that a red hat, a symbol of a political campaign, could turn a lunch into a confrontation. He sat down on a park bench nearby, feeling like he had just stepped out of a movie. Passers-by didn't pay him any attention, only the rustling of leaves, the crunching footsteps, and the casual chatter of people from different groups filled the air. Barron didn't want to think about what had happened in the restaurant. But it seemed to haunt him. He pulled out his phone, intending to text his mom. But then stopped. The thought of his mother's reaction made him feel burdened. She would surely say something encouraging. But right now, Barron didn't want that comfort. He just wanted to figure out if he had truly done something wrong by not agreeing with the manager's request. Had he overreacted? He sighed. Typed a few words. Then deleted them. Finally. He wrote a simple message to a close friend, got kicked out of a restaurant because of the hat. Not sure how to feel about it. Just as he was about to send it, Barron heard footsteps approaching from behind. He turned and saw a middle-aged man walking toward him. The man stopped in front of Barron, smiled, and said, "Hey. I saw you just left LA Terrace. Looks like they didn't treat you well." Barron was a little surprised, but kept his composure. He looked at the man, unsure of who he was or why he was interested. "Yeah. That's right. They asked me to take off my hat. But I refused," Barron replied, his voice slightly frustrated but still polite. The man chuckled softly and continued. "I'm a regular at that restaurant. And honestly, I don't agree with how they handled this. You have the right to express your views. And there's nothing wrong with that hat. I think they overstepped." Barron felt a bit lighter hearing this. As if someone was on his side. "Thank you," Barron replied. "I didn't think I did anything wrong. But maybe I shouldn't have let things go this far." The man sat down beside Barron, looking out at the horizon before speaking again. "It's just a hat. Right? But sometimes society gets too sensitive about symbols. I remember how the hospitality industry, especially places like LA Terrace, always tries to maintain an image. But at some point, that image becomes a burden." Barron listened but didn't feel fully convinced. He didn't want to escalate things. But a part of him felt that the respect he deserved wasn't there. Just because of a hat. He was treated this way, as if he was the one causing trouble. He sighed. "I definitely didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But I truly felt rejected for something I couldn't change." The man nodded slowly. "Exactly. Sometimes you can't change what others think of you. But what you can change is how you react. You can stand up and call for fairness. Or you can choose a different reaction, not with anger, but with calm and understanding. And I think you did the right thing." Barron was surprised by the man's words. He wasn't the type to speak out or make a strong protest. But he couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. He wondered. Could he turn this event into an opportunity for something good? Instead of just an unnecessary clash. "Can you help me with something?" Barron suddenly asked, turning to the man beside him. "I think I need to organize an event to show people that differences shouldn't divide us. I want to turn this into an opportunity." The man looked at Barron for a moment and then nodded. "You want me to help you organize the event?" "Yes," Barron answered. "I don't want to just be someone who's overlooked. I want to do something meaningful, an event that not only grabs attention but also carries a message of unity." The man smiled, intrigued by Barron's proposal. "Are you sure? This is a big idea." Barron looked him straight in the eye, his own gaze filled with determination. "I'm sure." With the man's help, Barron began planning the event he wanted to hold. It wasn't just going to be an ordinary event, but an opportunity to prove that differences didn't need to be barriers, but rather starting points for understanding and connection. The feeling of disappointment slowly faded, replaced by a burning desire for change. Barron knew that, while the MAGA hat might have caused a confrontation, he wasn't going to let it end there. He wanted to create a space where people could meet, talk, and understand each other, not because of a hat, but because of what we could learn from each other. But for now, Barron had a long road ahead. The next day, Barron had everything prepared for his event. He called a few friends who could help with organizing and promoting it. although there was some hesitation at first. Once they heard the purpose of the event, they all agreed right away. Barron didn't just want to hold a fundraising event, he also wanted to transform the tension into an opportunity to bring people together. Early in the morning, the sunlight bathed the city of Los Angeles in golden rays, in contrast to the gloomy atmosphere inside LA Terrace, where both Barron and the manager were still exhausted from yesterday's confrontation. The area outside where Barron was organizing the event was glowing with vibrance. He stood in the middle, observing everything happening around him with a sense of faith and hope swelling in his chest. "Hey, Barron." A friend of Barron's, Jake, arrived and patted him lightly on the shoulder. "Everything's coming together. Are you really sure about doing this? Do you think people will show up?" Barron smiled softly, looking at the stage where volunteers were setting up. Things were starting to come alive. Food stalls were lined up along the sidewalk. Tables with signs from charity organizations were ready. And a few street performers had begun rehearsing for their performances. "Yeah," Barron replied confidently. "I want this to be more than just a fundraising event. I want it to be a gathering. We need to create a space where people can talk to each other, no matter how different they are." Jake nodded, knowing Barron's heart was always in the right place. However, organizing such a large outdoor event wasn't easy. "All right. You're ready. But are you sure people will come? This event could attract a lot of attention." Barron looked around, his eyes filled with determination. "I don't care how many people come. What matters is that our message gets out. Even if just one person changes their mind, then we've succeeded." Before he could finish his sentence, a few volunteers came running with signs and banners with slogans about unity. Things were getting busier. Barron quickly walked around checking each booth one last time. The tension in him started to ease as everything seemed to be falling into place. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about what had happened at LA Terrace yesterday. Could he keep his composure and not let his emotions affect today's event? By midday, as everything was ready, the first wave of people started to arrive. At first, it was just a few families, some young groups, and a handful of pedestrians walking by. But gradually, the crowd began to grow. Families chatted. Young people took pictures by the booths. And volunteers enthusiastically invited everyone to support the charitable activities. One of the volunteers, Min, a longtime friend of Barron, ran up and patted him on the back. "We've got a charity group from another city here. They brought loads of stuff to donate. This is amazing." Barron looked at Min, his eyes lighting up with joy as the event started to gain attention. He didn't just want the event to succeed financially, he hoped it would be a place where people could see that unity and understanding between people with different views was possible. As the microphone was handed to Barron on the stage, he stood up, looked around at the crowd, and began to speak. "Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, we're not just participating in a fundraising event. We're also engaging in a conversation to understand each other better, to connect, and to show that even when we may disagree on something, we can still sit down together and respect one another." People started to pay attention, and light applause began. Barron continued, speaking about what had happened yesterday, but without going into negative details. He just wanted people to understand that this event wasn't about winning or losing, it was about accepting differences and finding common ground. "Thank you all for being here. The goal today is to build bridges, not walls. If we can understand each other better, if we can accept one another, then this society will be a much better place." Barron paused for a moment, looking out at the crowd before adding, "Everything I'm doing today is just one small step in a long journey. But I hope this will be the first step for many of us." The area erupted into applause. Barron felt a sense of relief. He had said what he needed to say. And it seemed that people were listening. Just then, someone from across the crowd started walking toward Barron. It was the manager of LA Terrace, the one who had asked Barron to take off his hat yesterday. Barron tensed up, feeling a bit of anxiety rising within him. He didn't know if the manager had come to confront him or to apologize. The manager stopped in front of Barron, looked at him for a moment, and then spoke. I don't know where to start. But I think I was wrong. Yesterday, I was just following the restaurant's policy. But I now realize that I was unfair in not considering the situation properly." He paused, his gaze apologetic. "I want to say I'm sorry." Barron was surprised, but then smiled. "I'm not angry with you. Really. But I hope we can learn how to face differences without hurting each other." The manager nodded, then looked toward the crowd, where participants were chatting, enjoying themselves, and taking part in various activities. "Is there anything I can do to help with this event?" he asked. Barron looked at him for a moment before replying, his voice softening. "If you can help create a space like this at LA Terrace, that would be the best way to make things right. We could collaborate on organizing an event about understanding and connection in the future." The manager stood silently for a moment, then smiled. "I'll think about that." That short conversation left a deep impression on Barron. He realized that change didn't always happen instantly. But small steps could lead to significant impact. The event ended on a hopeful note. Barron felt that he had done something meaningful. Not just for himself, but for the community around him. The event proved that differences, while they could create tension, could also become an opportunity for understanding when approached with sincerity. As the sun began to set behind the towering buildings, Barron stood on the stage looking out at the crowd. He knew that change wouldn't come easily. But today, at least he had started. And that was the most important thing. Less than a week after the fundraising event, everything seemed to have calmed down. Barron felt that he had accomplished something significant, even if it was just the first step. However, something unexpected happened, and things became more tense than ever. LA Terrace, the place where he and the manager had met after the event, was no longer just an ordinary restaurant. It had become a center of controversy, where political and social issues seemed to be erupting every hour. Barron clearly remembered that it was a beautiful day. He walked into LA Terrace, thinking he would enjoy a quiet lunch. But as soon as he stepped through the door, he noticed something strange. The restaurant was filled with unfamiliar faces and loud conversations. Some customers were even pointing at each other and whispering. "Barron, you're here." Min, his close friend, ran up to him, looking tense. "Have you heard? Everything is blowing up out there." Barron looked around and then turned back to Min. "Blowing up? What's happening?" "Look over there." Min pointed to a group of customers sitting by the window, having a heated discussion with the server. "This has gone viral on social media. People are flocking here to protest something related to you." Barron frowned. "What do you mean?" Min sighed. "It all started with the hat, the MAGA hat you wore. After the fundraising event, some people disagreed with what you did. They think you're supporting values they don't accept." Barron was stunned. He never imagined that such a small act could cause such a huge storm. He looked out the window, where several groups had gathered with banners and signs protesting what they deemed to be wrong. This can't be that serious. Can it? Min nodded. It's definitely gotten out of control. Supporters and opponents are now like opposing armies. Each with their own arguments. Barron felt dizzy. He never thought his actions would be judged so harshly. His heart suddenly tightened. All he wanted was for people to understand each other better. How could it have turned into this? As Barron walked toward the reception desk, the manager, who had been silent since the day before, now seemed tense. He looked at Barron with a worried, somewhat disappointed expression. "Barron. We need to talk," the manager said, his voice sounding weary. "What's going on?" Barron asked, a sense of unease creeping in. "It's about the MAGA hat," the manager said. "After that event, many people have protested. I've tried to explain that you just wanted to create a space for people to talk. But not everyone understands that. These people have come here demanding that we clarify the restaurant's stance on the event you organized." Barron swallowed. "So now they're here to hold me accountable for what happened?" The manager nodded, his face heavy. "They're not just asking that. They also want LA Terrace to sever ties with you. They believe a restaurant like ours can't support protests or political events." Barron felt anger rising in him. He had done everything for connection and mutual understanding. And now it was turning into a political battle he hadn't even participated in. "So what do I do now?" "We could stop," the manager said. "You could apologize and try to calm the situation down." Barron didn't respond immediately. Inside, a wave of anger was building up. He couldn't believe that something as simple as a hat could be so misunderstood and cause so much trouble. "I can't apologize for that," Barron said firmly. "If people don't understand the message I was trying to convey, I can't change that just because of a few criticisms." Min, who had been standing nearby, gently spoke up, "You might not change your stance, but at least think about the impact on the restaurant. People are talking a lot. And LA Terrace can't become the center of endless debates." Barron looked at Min and then back at the manager, feeling a bit exhausted. "So what should I do to resolve this situation?" The manager sighed. "We can't ignore it. If you don't want to apologize, maybe we should organize a public dialogue. Invite both the protesters and the supporters here so they can talk face to face and clear up any misunderstandings." Barron thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right. If that's the best way to resolve this, I'll do it." An hour later, an announcement was made on social media and through other channels. LA Terrace invites everyone to a dialogue about the recent fundraising event. All viewpoints are respected. This is an opportunity for us to understand each other better. When the dialogue began, Barron felt the tension in the air. The protesters were fully present, holding banners with strong slogans. The supporters of Barron's event were also there, sitting opposite each other, their eyes full of resolve. The dialogue opened with caution from both sides. Each person stood up one by one to present their views. One woman, a middle-aged customer, spoke up, "We're not opposed to what Barron is doing, it's the political nature of the event that we oppose. We don't want to be dragged into that debate." Barron sat and listened, his heart aching. He wanted to say that all he wanted was for people to understand each other. But things were not as simple as that. The debates continued for over an hour. The manager of LA Terrace stood by, watching everything unfold. He understood that, no matter how hard they tried, LA Terrace couldn't escape the controversy. After everyone had spoken, Barron stood up, took the microphone, and said, "I just want to say one thing. I didn't wear the hat to cause division. I just want each person to understand each other better. Even if we have differing views. If I was wrong, I'm open to listening and correcting my mistake. But we can't let a hat, an event, or a political viewpoint tear apart human connections. The applause rang out. But there were also many skeptical eyes. The dialogue ended without a clear conclusion. Barron knew that no matter what he did, the controversy would continue. But at least, he had voiced his side. LA Terrace, now, was no longer just a place to eat but had become a symbol of debates about politics and society. Barron couldn't change everything immediately. But he had planted a seed of understanding and respect. Perhaps that was the most important thing he could do at this moment. After the tense dialogue at LA Terrace, Barron felt that nothing had been resolved. Despite his efforts to explain his viewpoint, the opposition had yet to accept his perspective. Everything remained at a standstill. And his life had turned into a long, exhausting series of stressful days. A week later, as Barron sat in a quiet cafe seeking peace of mind, he received an unexpected call from an unfamiliar number. He hesitated but decided to answer. "Hello. Barron," a deep voice came through the line. "This is Mr. Sun, the one who attended the dialogue at LA Terrace the other day." Barron frowned, uncertain about the call. "Mr. Sun? Oh. I remember now. What's going on? Could we meet? I'd like to talk to you for a moment," Mr. Sun said, his calm voice betraying a hint of unease. Barron was taken aback but felt it was necessary to face the unresolved matters. "All right. Where should we meet?" "The usual place. LA Terrace," Mr. Sun replied. And the call ended abruptly. Barron looked out the window, pondering for a moment. He couldn't imagine why Mr. Sun, who had been so strongly opposed during the dialogue, would want to meet. Perhaps this would be an opportunity to clarify things. When Barron arrived at LA Terrace, Mr. Sun was already sitting in a quiet corner. He appeared deep in thought, holding a cup of coffee, his gaze directed out the window. Barron approached, unsure of how to start. Mr. Sun looked up, recognizing him, and waved. "Please. Sit," Mr. Sun invited, his tone still gentle. Barron sat across from him, still unsure of the reason for the meeting. "You called me here, what's this about?" Mr. Sun studied Barron for a moment, then sighed. "Actually, I wanted to apologize. I rushed to criticize you. After thinking it over, I realized I didn't fully understand your intentions." Barron was so surprised that he couldn't respond at first. He stared at Mr. Sun, unable to believe what he was hearing. You're serious?" "Yes. After the dialogue, I had time to reflect. The things I said, I don't entirely believe them. You were just trying to create a space where people could talk to each other. And now I see that. But I was too rigid. Only focusing on the hat and what others thought of it." Barron was silent, not knowing how to react. It felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted from his chest. I don't know how to thank you." Mr. Sun smiled softly, looking at Barron with sincerity. "No need to thank me. I'm older, I should have known that differences are natural in society. But I let my emotions control me too much. I realize now that sometimes we need to look at the bigger picture, rather than focus on small details." Barron breathed a sigh of relief, feeling as though a burden had been lifted. He forced a smile. "So, what should we do to make things right?" Mr. Sun looked at Barron with empathy. I think you've done the right thing. What's important is that we learn to listen and accept differences. I've spoken with a few people from the opposition. And they feel the same way. Maybe not everyone. But at least some are starting to change their minds. Barron nodded. A sense of hope welling up inside him. He didn't need to win every argument, just that the people around him understood his intentions was enough. It's wonderful to know that at least some people are beginning to understand. Mr. Sun smiled faintly. Exactly. And I think we could do something to create a space where we can continue to talk. Maybe another meeting. Where people can share their thoughts freely. Barron thought for a moment. Then nodded. I agree. People need a space like that. Where they're not judged just for having a different perspective. The meeting between Barron and Mr. Sun took place in an atmosphere of sincerity and openness. They talked about the events that had unfolded. The misunderstandings. And the opportunities for reconciliation. Slowly. Barron realized that although life wasn't always easy, meetings like this helped him grow. Teaching him the value of listening and respecting differences. After leaving LA Terrace, Barron felt lighter than ever. Although there were still many who didn't understand him. At least he had been able to clarify his viewpoint with someone important like Mr. Sun. He knew that sometimes acknowledging mistakes and seeking reconciliation wasn't easy. But small steps like these could change the world. Even if it was just within a small community. Barron walked out of the restaurant. Filled with hope. He knew that his journey wasn't just a battle of opinions or politics. It was a journey of seeking understanding. Forging connections. And above all, learning how to live peacefully with himself and those around him. The story of Barron at LA Terrace paints a powerful and emotional journey with a strong message about unity, understanding, and compassion. Through each tense situation, Barron not only faced challenges but also created opportunities for people to come closer together. Demonstrating the power of connecting hearts and building trust among individuals. The lessons from Barron's story can be applied to various situations in life. When facing difficulties, instead of reacting with anger or division, Barron chose to transform challenges into opportunities for growth and connection. He demonstrated that we can make a difference by fostering understanding. Not by judging others, but by listening to their stories and recognizing the common humanity in us all. In addition, Barron's willingness to forgive and reconcile, such as his meeting with the restaurant manager, shows that healing and moving forward are possible when we let go of pride and embrace empathy. This ability to forgive opens doors to new possibilities and helps break down barriers that divide us. Barron's message of unity and understanding resonated deeply with the crowd. And it reminded everyone that differences are not something to fear or divide us, but an opportunity to learn and grow together. Overall, Barron's journey teaches us that the strength of a community lies in its ability to listen, respect, and embrace each other's differences, creating a more compassionate and harmonious world. If Barron Trump's story at LA Terrace has inspired you and provided valuable life lessons, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more meaningful videos. We always strive to bring you content that helps you explore and learn new things every day. Additionally, we would love to hear your thoughts and reflections on this story. Do you believe that unity and understanding can overcome all differences? Have you ever experienced a similar situation? Please share your story in the comments below. We look forward to hearing from you and having a conversation. Finally, please share this video with your friends and family if you believe it's worth spreading. Together, we can create a positive community where everyone feels heard and respected. Thank you for joining us on this journey. See you in the next video.